At Jefferson Unitarian Church, we call this podcast Faithful Resistance for a reason, a couple of very literal reasons. Reason one is the resistance part. We often highlight a particular justice group that stands up for us and for our neighbors. And this time around, we'll explore immigrant protection teams in Colorado with Jenna McAfee. The faithful part of this podcast includes a conversation with Senior Minister Mike Morran from First Unitarian Society of Denver. Here's Jenna to start off with. We're so pleased today to welcome Jenna McAfee, who is the statewide coordinator of immigrant protection teams in Colorado. And so let's unpack what all that means. What the heck, Jenna, is an immigrant protection team?
We started the immigrant protection teams right after this latest election. The original purpose was simply to make a clear statement to immigrants in our state that someone is standing with you. We care about you. We recognize the value that you bring to our communities, and we are standing with you. The second purpose of the immigrant protection teams was to aggressively counteract the many misconceptions that are out in the media about immigrants. We have information that we hand out to people that correct information about immigrants and crime, immigrants taking public services. I mean, we identified something like 15 separate misconceptions about immigrants. And the third purpose of the immigrant protection teams is to proactively work with elected officials at the local level, the state level, and the federal level to come up with resolutions, policies, and ultimately laws that are more protective of immigrants, that recognize their value to our economy, to our communities. So those are the three purposes of immigrant protection teams.
So let's go back to the first one, to let immigrants know that somebody has their back. How do you let them know? And what does it mean that we have their back? Are we doing things to actively help and support them?
Absolutely. We train our volunteers. We have about 25 immigrant protection teams across the state. We train our volunteers in we train them, first of all, in how to respond to an ICE raid. If we hear of an ICE raid in a particular community, our volunteers are trained to be what we call confirmers, which means that they go to the ICE raid and confirm whether or not the people there are actually ICE agents. And we videotape what's going on. We take notes. So that's one thing that our volunteers do. We also train them to hand out information about know your rights to individual immigrants, to businesses that employ immigrants or have immigrants who are customers. There are many things that businesses can do to actually protect immigrant communities in their areas.
I'd love to know more about the confirmers thing, because that just fascinates me. I think about the videos on the news that we have seen about masked people going up and taking people off the street. So your confirmers are going up to those masked people and saying, "Show me your ID." How do they confirm?
Yeah, we first of all, the confirmers. There's a network in Colorado called the Colorado Rapid Response Network. And it's staffed by people from the Colorado Immigrant Rights Coalition and the American Friends Service Committee, and then a bunch of volunteers. And so what we do, if there's a report of an ICE raid in a particular location, first of all, once you've gone through the training, you get a text on your phone. It says, go to this address. And this is all geographically oriented, so only people who are within, a 5-minute or so response time from that location get that text. You show up, and you're the ally to the immigrant. So if there's an immigration raid in progress, you can call out to the immigrants who are affected, reminding them that they have the right to remain silent. They don't have to open their cars or they don't have to open their doors to ICE agents. And then if there's an opportunity, we do go up to an ICE agent and collect information like their name and their badge number. We write down license plate numbers. Those are all things that we do to confirm, whether or not an immigration raid is actually occurring. And we take videotape of what's happening. This is all really important in case someone's constitutional rights are violated, that we have this documented. Because, there are several cases now where an immigrant's rights have been violated, and then an attorney will bring that up, in a lawsuit, and ICE will then typically back down. That's what's happened recently.
Really? These things have happened in Colorado that
I don't know. The one thing we do know that's happened in Colorado is that after we have trained an immigrant, we know of several cases where they have been able to avoid arrest just by saying, I'm exercising my right to remain silent. I'm not opening the door unless ICE has a judicial warrant, which they never do. They never have a judicial warrant. That's the only way they can come into a house or a business is if they have a judicial warrant. So yes, we have several documented cases in Colorado where an individual has been able to avoid arrest by using those techniques.
Playing devil's advocate, the other side. I'm not trying to other the other side, but I guess I just have. They say, well, they've broken the law. Why should they be able to get away with this? Where are you coming from when you want to protect an immigrant's right who may have not entered the country legally?
Well, first of all, the ICE agent doesn't have the authority to arrest anyone unless they have reasonable cause. And just going up to somebody on the street based primarily on the color of their skin, which is what ICE has been doing, is clearly not sufficient reason to arrest anyone. And they don't know whether or not that person is here legally or illegally. And by the way, in the immigrant rights movement, we use the term undocumented. We don't use the term illegal. So that's why we just make sure that everyone knows their constitutional rights. Every single person in the United States has the same constitutional rights. And all we're doing is making sure that the immigrants are aware of their constitutional rights.
Why is this important to you personally?
And I feel a moral obligation to help the stranger. So I do feel very personally about protecting the immigrants that we have in our community, and I also feel that they enrich our community.
I want to jump to how people can get involved in the organization, and I'm just going to say, how brave do they have to be to do this work?
We now have, I would guess, 1,000 people in Colorado who are connected to one of our IPTs. Again, this includes people on the western slope, in southern Colorado, all across the metro area. These are people who care strongly about what they're doing. These are people who want to help. If you want to contact me, I can get you in touch with the IPT leader in your particular community. But there's so many things that our teams are doing right now. We are participating in the protests against the detention centers that are being planned in Colorado by ICE. So we're going to protests, we're writing letters to the editor, we are contacting our federal elected officials, our state elected officials, and our local elected officials to encourage them to do everything they can to to protect immigrants because it's clear that the current administration is really targeting immigrants.
This is a full-time job for you, and
It
probably
is.
for a lot of people at this point.
It is. It is.
And
Yeah, I love it. I love it. And I'm meeting so many wonderful people who are in community with me doing this work. It's extremely gratifying to see so many people who want to help immigrants in their communities.
well, we certainly appreciate the work that you're doing and the 1,000 people across Colorado. Maybe we can get a couple more who've heard you today and are
That'd be
inspired by
great.
your work. Yeah.
That'd be great.
All
The
right.
more, the merrier.
Thanks for your time.
Of course. Thank you.
So now here's the faithful part of Faithful Resistance for this episode. A conversation we just had with the senior minister of another UU congregation in the Denver area. Reverend Mike Morran has been at First Unitarian Society of Denver for more than 20 years. It's a good day when we can welcome Reverend Mike Morran to the Faithful Resistance podcast. And before I even read his bio on their website, I would have said that he's on fire. Because he certainly was on fire the last time we visited your church when we sang there recently. And so let's start by saying, what is it that has you most on fire in this faithful resistance world these days?
Well, I think anybody that is paying attention to what's going on in the world right now ought to be on fire. If like what's the old saying, right? If you're not outraged, you're not paying attention. We're being affronted, assaulted, really, on every conceivable front of things we value, from gay rights and trans rights to the freedom of universities and school funding, to the occupation of our nation's capital and the threats of occupying other cities around the country. We're seeing assaults on law firms and free speech. We're seeing it just goes on and on. So I think as someone who values democracy, not because democracy is perfect, but because democracy raises the odds of everybody having a voice and a chance. That's why I believe in democracy, and democracy is under full frontal assault on every conceivable level, from the courts to the justice system, to the education system, to the way we teach history, on and on and on. So I'm on fire for how we can be focal points of resistance.
I don't mean this to be an obnoxious question, but do you yell at your TV when you watch the news?
Um, I, I, I'm not a personally, I'm not a TV watcher. I have one in my house, but my wife watches it. I get my news from New York Times and other sources online. So I don't yell at my TV, but I do sigh heavily when I read the news
Yeah, there's.
or sometimes cuss.
What would you say right now you're focusing on at, well, I'll say personally, and then I'll say with your congregation too. Or can you just focus on one thing, considering all the things that are going on in the world?
I think it's really hard to focus on just one thing because, we all have our pet issues and our pet things we're concerned about. However, I think in any organized movement of resistance, you absolutely need to have some kind of a wedge issue, right? You have to have some issue that you can make some progress on, and it's not possible. And this is by design, right? It's not possible for us to resist on every front. We can't advocate for universities and advocate for trans people and advocate for the justice system and protest against the Supreme Court. And we can't do that, right? They are way more resourced and strategic than we are at this point. We need an issue that we can make some progress on, and this is true, historically, demonstrably. Whenever there's been whenever there's been progress in any of the numerous countries around the world where there are dictatorships and autocracies, when progress has been made against those, there's been an issue that gets people on fire, as it were. I personally think that issue for us is immigration. I I'm I have a trans daughter. That issue is very close to my heart, but I don't think that is the wedge issue for making any progress against this particular administration and their agenda. I do think immigration has a much higher chance because that issue touches everybody's life, no matter what, from the labor force to the economy to the health of our communities to the school systems. I think that is the wedge issue that if we're going to make progress, it's going to be in that.
Well, you certainly, and your congregation is known, certainly among UU circles, for having been a sanctuary congregation, literally, for
Yes.
activist Jeanette Visguera, and
Yeah.
who's now in custody,
Three
even though,
times. Right.
yeah.
5 months now.
How did that inform how you look at the immigration issue, knowing her and knowing what she stands for?
Oh, this is a very long story, but I'll try and make it really short. Uh, 10 years ago, or I guess it was more like 11 or 12 years ago, it was it was clear that we needed to get people's stories in front of the general public. It did seem for a while, especially when Obama was in office, it felt like we had a window of opportunity to make some real progress, to make some real change in immigration reform. We had a clear agenda. There was a window of opportunity, and doing sanctuary, offering sanctuary first to Arturo Hernandez Garcia and then to Jeanette, doing sanctuary was a way to put real faces and real stories in front of people, so that people understood that um, we're not talking about gangsters. We're not talking about criminals. We're talking about hard-working, faithful, some of the finest people you could ever hope to have in your life. That's who we're talking about. We got involved in sanctuary and founding the Metro Denver Sanctuary Coalition with a whole bunch of other groups like the Colorado Immigrant Rights Coalition and the American Friends Service Committee and the Mountain View Friends Society and numerous other organizations. We got involved in that as part of a public campaign to make this a personal issue, to help people understand that this is about real lives, this is about real families, this is about children. Um, so that was a moment in time. Nobody that I know is offering sanctuary to individuals anymore. That may be happening somewhere, but it's nowhere that I know of. No congregation that I know of currently has anybody in sanctuary, and that's because that moment in time has passed. We're at a very different place right now. There is nobody I know has any real hope of passing legitimate immigration reform through Congress as it currently is. Um, so we have to move on to different strategies.
And we need to hear from masses of people too. I can't believe that we had some great protests in the spring, but where are they now? Does this bother you? Does this worry you that we're not on the streets when all this stuff is happening that we're not on the streets?
I think marches are important. I don't think marches really change anything. I and I'm just speaking personally here. I won't speak for my congregation or for anybody else or anybody who's organizing marches or might think about organizing marches. I've been to, I don't know, 100 marches in my life, maybe 200, I don't know, on every conceivable issue. I personally have come to see marches primarily as an opportunity to network with people who are activists. I don't, I, the media covers it, but frankly, the administration we currently have in Washington doesn't give a hoot. about how many people march in the street. They've been very clear about that. They they shrug their shoulders and move on and keep doing what they're doing. I think the change is going to happen from organizations connecting with each other, sharing their resources, having a strategy. I think immigration is the wedge issue that we might be able to make some progress on, or at least slow down the overall agenda. Um, marches are fine to get a little attention on some things and get people together and maybe generate some energy and rah rah yay for us, whose streets, our streets, yay. But I don't think they actually change anything.
Okay, then more importantly, not only for the country, but for you, where do you get your energy to keep going? I want to do the faithful part of faithful resistance.
Yeah,
What
yeah.
stokes your fires about from your faith?
From my faith, it angers me that there is so much unnecessary cruelty, unnecessary suffering, unnecessary injustice. It makes me really angry that suffering and injustice and cruelty are happening when they just don't need to happen. We have the resources to feed people, to educate people, to include people, to provide a pathway to citizenship, to provide opportunities. We just don't need to do it this way. It doesn't have to be this way. Um, that really bothers me, and I fully recognize I'm a poster boy for white male privilege. Um, Everybody should have the opportunities and the ease of moving through this world in the way that I do.
What can we Unitarian Universalists do together, front range, nationally, that might make an impact? I know that's a ridiculously huge question.
That's a ridiculously huge question. I think kind of first things first. We need to not give in to the temptation, the seduction of helplessness. I see that in people all the time. It just feels so big. It feels so helpless. It feels like such a juggernaut. I don't know where to start. I don't know how to deal with this. There's even I've been preaching about this almost since the inauguration, right? We are reeling, I think, as religious liberals. We are reeling from realizing that the country we lived in is not the country we actually live in anymore. I feel this personally myself. The country I thought I grew up in, the country I was educated in, the country I was enculturated in, the values I was taught, that country doesn't exist right now. It simply does not exist. It was a myth. It was always a myth, and right now it's very obviously that was a myth, and we need some time to process that. That is not something we can just absorb instantly and move on from. We need some time to process that. We need to process that together. Uh, that's I guess that's where that leads me is none of us can do anything alone. Like not one thing worthwhile can we do alone. I believe in the power of organization and the organization of power. We need each other. We to the extent that we remain isolated, that is the exact extent to which we remain powerless, isolated, disempowered. Um, we need to connect with each other as much as is humanly possible. We need to have the hard conversations. We need to feel the support and the belonging of our communities, whether that's our family communities or our neighborhoods or our workplaces or our congregations. And then we need to organize on whatever issue we can organize on. I mean, Some of this is like community organizing 101, right? We have to find out what we care about together and then organize together. There's nothing more satisfying than working together with your friends towards a common goal. So I mean that may sound like it's a little simplistic, but when times are hard, stick to the fundamentals. That's a good adage for me anyway.
Thank you for answering questions, including ridiculously huge ones. I appreciate that.
Sure.
And feel better for having heard your answers. Thanks for being with us today.
You're welcome.
We are always looking for ideas for organizations, for community activists, and for faith leaders to talk to for our podcast. And if something or someone comes to mind, please email us at faithfulresistance@jeffersonunitarian.org. It'd also be great if you'd share this podcast with others of goodwill and push that subscription button. We want to keep drawing the Faithful Resistance circle wider and wider. And then, as we always say, each day, try to keep doing the next right thing. Go out and do the next right thing.